You'll come across a lot of ideologies, a lot of different organizations, all people trying to find solutions to how do we help the world condition. But what if there are solutions that we're just simply not taught about? And honestly, I share a lot of those on my channel, permaculture, and another one in particular, voluntaryism. This video, we're going to get into detail what voluntaryism actually means, and it's really rather simple. Because if we think about it, it's some of the simplest things in life that really makes the difference. Why we very much want to live in the first place. We want to be happy, we want to be healthy. We want a good future for our children, and having a world based on one ideology, one set framework of doing things is very much often problematic because we think we're doing good and then we think that this is the way we should model the world, but then it ends up backfiring on us because we told everyone they should do it. Rather, there's this idea of letting people live their own lives and letting people decide for themselves what is best. And yet, what if that creates order rather than us saying this is the best model for everybody else to use? And this idea is really encapsulated in this idea of voluntaryism. This idea that's considered alternative to not just Republican or Democrat, but also libertarian. It's alternative to all of them because it's seeing beyond them, which if we're going to evolve the human destiny, if we are going to move forward in our evolution toward recognizing natural rights or natural law and humanitarianism as opposed to authoritarianism and man-made law and man-made rights and rules and rituals and telling people how to live their lives and slavery and all these things of the past we don't want to be a part of anymore, then we would recognize voluntarism as one of the most essential stepping stones for humanity that we could ever do heading into our future. Let's get into it.
You read Emerson?
Should I?
Yeah, you should.
All right.
When people say they don't want war in the world, when people say they want peace and harmony in the world, well, this is just about that. This article was written by Mana Alexis, and I want to thank you, Mana Alexis, for this article. It's really awesome, goes into detail with voluntarism, so let's get right into it. It says, in the landscape of political philosophy, few ideologies offer as compelling a vision for a just, prosperous society as voluntarism. Rooted in the fundamental principles of individual autonomy, non-aggression, and voluntary cooperation, voluntarism advocates for a society where interactions between individuals and groups are based on mutual consent rather than coercive government authority. In essence, it proposes a paradigm shift away from heavy-handed government control towards a decentralized, voluntary society where freedom reigns supreme. I once thought that our country was the best on earth, and that our constitution must be upheld, and our founding fathers, they knew what to do, and we're just not really following their advice, and there are people even before them that spoke great words of wisdom and were, breaking away from our culture, from our roots. Everybody in society is getting really confused, but I realized there's a much bigger picture to this, and there's solutions that aren't really being talked about. One of the main principles is respect for individual autonomy. At the heart of voluntarism lies a profound respect for individual autonomy. In a voluntarist society, individuals are free to make their own choices in associations without interference from a centralized authority. This respect for personal freedom is not merely a philosophical abstraction, but a guiding principle that informs every aspect of voluntarist thought and action. And in fact, autonomy is actually a course where you can go to getautonomy.info, and this is not a sponsor or anything. These people actually talk to you about, life skills and business skills and how to achieve success and go into the world and learn those things that school didn't teach you, which are rather fundamental. But see, that's what this is all about. Learning self-ownership and those things that the school model, which is based on the Prussian model of schooling, is not going to teach you, because it teaches rather obedience as virtue, but not virtue as obedience. And that is the key with this, is understanding, okay, voluntary interaction, that's a moral rule. And with that rule, that negates the idea of rulers having a centralized authority, because you now rule yourself. And so that's where this respect for individual autonomy really comes from. And that's where the free market also comes from, where people interact and trade with one another voluntarily on their own. Now, another key principle is the non-aggression principle. So central to the voluntarist philosophy is the non-aggression principle, which holds that the initiation of force or coercion against others is inherently wrong. By rejecting the use of force to achieve social or political goals, voluntarism lays the groundwork for a more peaceful and harmonious society where individuals interact with one another voluntarily based on mutual respect and cooperation. Free will, the ability to decide for yourself what you want to do. Now, there's also an economic side to this as well, as I mentioned, the free market, and that is efficiency and innovation. Without the burden of heavy-handed government regulation and bureaucracy, voluntarist societies can thrive on the dynamics of voluntary exchange and entrepreneurship. Freed from the shackles of government intervention, individuals are empowered to respond more effectively to market demands, driving innovation and economic growth. And you can see this simply through supply and demand, and an unregulated market means people can trade with each other more freely from other countries. There isn't restrictions regarding natural medicine, as many people will see. Also, they can't even just grow a certain plant like marijuana, or they can't drink a certain beverage like raw milk. And these things can make a big impact. As we see, marijuana can help a lot of people medically, or raw milk can help a lot of people with their diet and nutrition. Now, there's also personal responsibility as a benefit to voluntarism, because there's actually a higher emphasis on accountability, not less. In a society where individuals are not reliant on government intervention to solve their problems, people are more likely to take ownership of their actions and work together to address challenges cooperatively. This fosters a culture of self-reliance and resilience where communities are better equipped to weather the storms of adversity. And this is not a theory of like, oh, well, if everybody in society does this, society will be better. Because actually, we live voluntarily all the time, every day, as human beings. It's part of our nature. The problem is, there's a part of ourselves where we say it's okay to commit violence when it's not. And that is where politics and government comes in. So if I put these questions on the screen for you, this is the alternative to voluntarism, and that's called statism. It's the belief that somebody should rule over your own life other than you, that somebody can claim your own property other than you. Again, it's your property. Do you own it? Do you own up to your own ownership? Well, we need to be able to show that by our actions and our examples and exercise our rights, as some people would say. And so with voluntarism, it's not just an exercise of rights, it's also the protection of rights, because governments are basically told to us that they protect our rights. But whenever in the history of the world have governments only protected our rights? They've always violated human rights. And this is what humanity is coming to understand, which is why voluntarism is inevitable. By transitioning to a voluntarist society where interactions are based on voluntary consent, we can better protect the rights of individuals and ensure that no one is subject to unjust coercion or oppression. Decentralization and local empowerment as well. By delving power from centralized authorities to local levels, voluntarist societies allow communities to govern themselves and according to their own values and preferences. This promotes grassroots decision-making and accommodates diverse perspectives. There's many ways to handle the world's problems. There's many ways to protect your rights, and people have different methods of doing that. And if you allow the free market to operate under that demand, then there will be a whole host of solutions, not just one. When things happen in second and you only have people to call minutes away, maybe you can be actually more prepared and people will be more on the lookout because they're not lazy. They're not in this slave-like mindset that we have now where we believe, okay, the government will handle all my rights for me. They're there to protect me. I don't need to protect myself. This is the mentality of a lot of people who live in cities, for example. So as I mentioned, also resilience, there's also adaptability. Without relying on top-down government solutions, communities can respond more flexibly to evolving circumstances and challenges. As you see, AI is developing, a lot of laws are now at question, like impersonation laws. And then what if we were to develop, I don't know, flying cars? I mean, what's going to happen to all those laws on the road? And see, there's a lot of things constantly changing. How could we really have a static system? We say if you cross this imaginary border, one thing that was legal now becomes illegal. where does that actually founded in morality? It's just founded in people's whims. It's founded on people's opinions and what they think should be done. But it's not actually based on any sort of principle where we can say this applies universally to everybody for the end of time. And that's no wonder why it doesn't last. No wonder why it's so controversial, because you do have so many different instances of so many different things happening, and you can't say this is the one thing you must do for everything. So making everything voluntary allows people to pursue the life they want to live for themselves without telling people what to do. That's why it's so important. And so finally, of course, voluntaryism is the promotion of voluntary solutions. They encourage the development of voluntary solutions to social problems such as charity, mutual aid, and community cooperation. By emphasizing voluntary action and spontaneous order, we can foster a culture of compassion, empathy, and solidarity that transcends the limitations of government intervention. And this is key too, because even I talk about the ancient Taoist philosophy from China, way back then, when they recognized, hey, government does not have the right to rule over us because we rule ourselves. They said, hey, if you leave people alone, order will manifest itself just like everything else in nature. But if you tell people how to live their own lives, actually you're going to end up with chaos. And that's exactly what we have in today's world. Democide is the #1 cause of unnatural death, and that is known as death by government. So is it really a source of security, or is it a source of oppression? Just look at World War II, for instance. How many people worshipped Hitler and Stalin, all these figures, as if they're gods? And how many people do that now with politicians and treat them and look up to them and say, well, you know, if I want to change the world, all I got to do is vote. And the majority is what matters. But what about the people who don't want that? And we don't consider that idea of consent, of basic morality. And we are willing to impose our will on others using law, which is violence. As Leo Tolstoy, known as one of the greatest writers of all time, warned us and said, hey, law is slavery. And it's always been based on that. The first governments were warmongers. You know, they thought they had a divine right by God to rule over their other men. And they said, hey, you know, we got to go conquer and take over all these villages and make them our slaves, and they'll become our citizens, and they have to work for their freedom, and then we'll grant it to them. But could you be granted your freedom, or is your freedom something inherent within you? This is what the abolitionists started to understand when they understood what slavery was by its nature. Okay? Governments have always been bound to it, which is why they defended it to its very end, chattel slavery. But there's other forms they warn us about as well. See, critics of voluntarism may argue that it's utopian or impractical, the same way people say abolitionism and the end of slavery is utopian or impractical. But nothing could be farther from the truth. Voluntarism offers real-world solutions to some of the most pressing challenges facing society today. By promoting voluntary solutions to social problems such as charity, mutual aid, and community cooperation, voluntarism empowers individuals and communities to address issues in a way that is both effective and compassionate. And that's the key, both effective and good. You know, a lot of people think, well, in order for it to be good, it can't necessarily be compassionate. You know, it's like we got to do some things. It's a necessary evil. People will make that as an excuse for government and for its violence done against peaceful people. No evil is necessary if you recognize it as evil. There's always an option or an alternative out of that, and you can educate people and change their minds to change the reality, just as the abolitionists did to say, hey, slavery is wrong, we can end it now. You know, you can't just write it down on a piece of paper and expect everybody to just change their mind. Oh, yeah, slavery's wrong after thousands of years. No, it takes a shift in conscience, and this is where we're heading. I think not many people can disagree with this idea of voluntarism because it represents a bold and visionary path towards freedom and harmony. But by upholding the principles of individual autonomy and non-aggression and voluntary cooperation, voluntarism offers a compelling alternative to a heavy-handed government control. It is time for us to reimagine society not as a battleground of competing interests, but as a tapestry of voluntary interactions and mutual respect. Only then we can truly unlock the full potential of human freedom and create a world where everyone has the opportunity to thrive. Thank you guys for watching. If you want to send me your article, go to theliberator.us. That's theliberator.us. I'll turn it into a video for you. But we also have a bunch of other projects there and a networking page if you want to meet up with people in your area, or even just go on different servers and learn more about all this great information, learn how to grow your own food, you know, learn these ancient philosophies and this untold knowledge and wisdom that has been kept hidden from you. This is the key if we want to innovate. Right? We can't be stuck in our boxes and do what we've always been doing for all this time. There is new information out there. There's all these books and all these videos at our fingertips. Will we use it? That's up to us. Okay? What we do with our time and attention. Thank you, Mana Alexis, again for this article. And if you're interested in voluntaryism or you have some thoughts about it, put it in the description below. I heard somebody say, oh, I want to call it consentism, you know, because it's based on consent. It's the same thing. You know, some people will just talk about natural law. Some people will deliver it through the lens of agorism. They've had other terms to admit to this. Critocracy and autarky and a bunch of others that people have made up, you know, for just terms to represent this autonomous human potential that is recognizing simply self-ownership and that you own you and you don't own other people. If you do recognize that you own yourself, how far are you willing to go? Thank you for watching.